Hi there, welcome to the Emerging Purpose Podcast. With me, Greg Donaldson. This is episode 13 with Sameer Patel. Hi folks, how you doing? As I record this, it's March the 30th, 2026. It's been a bright sunny day here in Brighton, in Sussex in the UK, and there's a little bit of hope in the air, which is very nice. And I haven't recorded a podcast for a while or put one out. Things have been crazy busy and different strands going off. The world is obviously a crazy fragmented place at the moment. War going on in the Middle East. We've got the crazy American president basically just saying whatever he wants to say. And truth just seems like a strange thing. What is truth? Anyway, as I'm here walking through St Anne's Wells in Brighton, it looks to be coming on to a full moon, which I didn't actually realise. I don't think it is a full moon, but it's a near one. And I've been up to some very interesting things. I've been very lucky. Last 3 months I got an opportunity to play Johnny Rooster Byron in the play Jerusalem by Jez Butterworth. And that experience has been incredible. I have famously, Mark Rylance played him in the West End and took him, played him for a year and then went off to New York to play him on Broadway. And then I think they revived the show about 5 years ago and did it again. Mackenzie Crook was in it. It was an amazing play, and it's set in down in the West Country. And it follows the archetype of this wild man, Johnny Rooster Byron, who lives at the edge of the forest. And he's this crazy kind of wild man archetype that has his followers who are teenagers. And he talks about meeting ancient giants at Stonehenge and how he was born with a cloak and all his teeth fully speaking, and he just has these marvellous stories and sort of represents this kind of poetic side that we all have within us, and it was an absolute pleasure to play him, and a real lesson for me as well to sort of remember the magical aspects of life and how to bring those into everyday life. So that has been a real treat, and I really hope to either get to play him again or some similar characters to him, because it was a real treat, and the play went really well. Also, I've been learning to tattoo, strangely. I think Johnny brought that on for me. I got really into putting some art on myself and getting into the idea of back into drawing and painting, and suddenly I find myself with a tattoo machine, and I give out some tattoos to my friends, and I've been practicing on fake skin and things like that. But it's such a beautiful passion and a beautiful honour to be able to put permanent markers on my friends. The ones that are foolish enough to let me, anyway. So anyway, let's get on with the episode. This is an episode that I had a conversation with Sameer. I met Sameer at the end of 2024 when he was invited to be a speaker on a panel that I was moderating to do with psychedelics and conscious evolution. I wanted to find out more about him before the event, so I asked him if he'd be up for chatting, and he said yes, and we had a very interesting conversation, and he's a very interesting guy. Let me just give you an introduction to Sameer. He's a filmmaker, and he's a co-founder of the Kundalini Collective, an organisation established in 2018 to support individuals experiencing spiritual awakenings. He had his own awakening in 2006, and he was profoundly changed his life, leading him to explore a more spiritual and shamanic culture worldwide. Prior to this, Sameer worked in film and finance, but inspired by his transformation, he pursued a more creative path. His films have been acquired by Sony and Sky Arts. As a producer, he recently completed a British-Iranian feature adaptation of Raina Fassbinder film called The Bitter Tears of Saha Zand. He's currently developing a documentary of non-ordinary transformative experiences and their implications. It was a long time ago when this conversation, and I haven't been able to get the podcast out, but I'm very happy that it is coming out. In this episode, we talk about the strange intersection of paranormal research, consciousness, psychedelics, and purpose, that we explore how non-ordinary states through psychedelics, meditation, yoga, rave culture, and Kundalini awakening can both heal and destabilise, especially when they bring old trauma and questions of meaning to the surface. So it's really lovely to speak to Sameer, and he shares his own journey from his corporate and music industry careers into a profound spiritual awakening. And we look at what it might mean to treat trauma healing and inner work as a form of collective evolution. This conversation took place online in October 2024, and I hope you find it interesting. I certainly did. So are you reading anything at the moment that's of interest?
Yeah, so I've just finished a book called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon by James Lukatsky, George Knapp, and Colm Kellner. Should I tell you what it's about?
Yes, please. Yeah, that sounds fascinating.
So it's a kind of sequel to The Hunt for the Skinwalker. So to cut a long story short, the Pentagon has had a special access program, which was revealed in the last 5 years, where they investigated paranormal activity, stroke UFO activity. They invested $22 million, and it was done in such a way that a few people in the government knew about it. And it was to understand whether paranormal stroke UAP activity can be weaponized, or whether other countries were weaponizing it. So they were looking at a particular piece of land in Utah, which was nicknamed Skinwalker Ranch. And Skinwalker is a indigenous American name for a mischievous shaman who can shapeshift. And one of the reported sites that scientists would see but never be able to record was a wolf-like person standing on two hind legs, which matches the indigenous description of a skinwalker, a therianthrope, someone who's kind of a human stroke animal. The reason why it's called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon is because subsequently the scientists who were investigating this particular farm would go back to the East Coast, Virginia, or near the Pentagon where they actually worked, and they would begin to have poltergeist activity in their houses. Their families would have it, and they would start seeing orbs and start seeing strange occurrences, which was seen at this farm in Utah. So they called this a hitchhiker effect. And the hitchhiker effect is this kind, and they compared it scientifically to a virus, that actually there is some kind of viral push of this experience. Families and friends and people on the streets would see similar things. And it was tens, if not, so they had about, I think they had quite a number of scientists over a number of years, over 2 years actually, initially investigating for the Pentagon. And quite a high number of these officials, plus Pentagon military officials, began to experience this activity. Then it was shut down, not because it wasn't working, but because it became an embarrassment to the Defense Department. So it was a DIA operation, and when the heads changed under Obama, the new heads became embarrassed or worried about the fact that there was money being spent to investigate paranormal activity, so they shut it down. But actually, they collected a lot of information, and that information sits in a database, and that database is owned by the DIA. And the other interesting thing about it, if I'm not sure whether this is interesting for everybody, but the person who actually owned the farm and actually privately funded it before in the 90s was a guy called Robert Bigelow.
Yeah.
He's a billionaire aerospace engineer. Well, no, he's not an engineer himself. He's an entrepreneur. And he started a group called NIDS, which I think means the National Investigation Division of Science or something. I can't remember. And they started the investigation. He got funding from the Pentagon 10 years later. Then he sold the farm, and the farm became famous. It became a documentary on a Discovery Channel, kind of watering down these experiences slightly. But then this billionaire started, through this program NIDS, an essay competition of $1 million about life after death. And it was Jeffrey Mishlove who won the competition. I don't even know Jeffrey Mishlove.
No.
He's so Jeffrey Mishlove in the 70s had an amazing program that went out on TV. You can see on the internet, and he interviewed a lot of people in this, like Terence McKenna, or gurus, or famous New Age people in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first person to create content around this idea, this energy of New Age, this New Age movement. Mm-hmm. So he's now in his 80s. He wrote an essay 4 years ago. He won like $500,000. And the essay competition was research into life after death, or proof that consciousness can exist outside the body.
Wow.
And that group have a lot of money funding a lot of projects. So Robert Bigelow's mission is looking at consciousness and the nature of consciousness, and actually putting money and real scientific endeavor behind it, whether it's co-funded by the government or co-funded by private people. And effectively, the crossover between the UAPs and life after death is that all the research that they came to in Skinwalker Farm, this activity is linked to consciousness. It's not necessarily aliens, although it could be. It's actually about the nature of reality, the nature of consciousness. And what people are interacting with can go back thousands of years, whether they be angels, demons, and it has an interdimensional perspective, i.e., it doesn't necessarily exist materialistically in our space, but it can cross over. And so what I find interesting is that there's a lot of government research, a lot of funding that has gone into this, and because of the political hot potato, they just sit on this information. But the people in it know that it's actually suggesting certain implications about reality. But whenever they talk about it, the media kind of, not that it's changing slowly, kind of poo-poo it because they can't accept such weird, spooky outcomes of scientific research. So the book's called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon by James Lukatsky. James Lukatsky has been, he's a PhD rocket scientist for the Defense Department, and he initiated this. The other guy is George Knapp. George Knapp is a reporter in Las Vegas, but he's known for breaking the UFO kind of movement in the 80s. And a guy called Colm Kellner, who's a scientist, who was the lead scientist in Skinwalker Ranch in the 90s.
Wow.
And it's an interesting book because it just shows the level of research. So it doesn't, the outcomes, people may already believe the outcomes, but it shows that actually scientists have been taking this research quite seriously. And they've got a lot of data that might suggest things that we already experientially believe. Anyway, that's
I mean, that sounds absolutely incredible. As you were sort of talking, I was like thinking of like, the way that DMT is being studied now, and like this sort of interdimensional feeling of like, almost something similar in terms of like, there's these kind of collective experiences, machine elves, etc., or meeting certain entities. Right. Sounds like, yeah, like the interdimensional stuff's just really fascinating. Yeah. It's kind of what it does is it crosses over a number of different experiences, but whether they're shamanic, spiritual, UFO, paranormal, it's suggesting that actually there's probably one overarching
model of the universe that can actually explain all of these different experiences. And people portal into these experiences from different ways. And it just so happened that this particular land had so many reportings of strange activity over a number of years. It was a hotspot, and they just decided to research it. But as we know, there are probably hotspots all over the world, and they don't get the scientific research that this particular place got.
Unbelievable, isn't it? That's great. That's amazing. So there's something about like the information's now coming through, and it's been recorded, and there's some...
Although the database is still under lock and key in the DIA.
Is it?
So they haven't released it. And every time there's a Freedom of Information Act release, and there's been a lot of them, it gets denied. So a lot of people who now have to get information declassified have applied for information from this database, and they all get pushback. Where they can get other stuff declassified, they can't get this database declassified. So when they write about it, they're allowed to write about it in certain ways because they were the people running it, but they can't, because they signed their own version of official secrets. They can't actually give you all of the detail that they discovered. They can suggest things, and the books have to be signed off by the Pentagon. So they go through a process and they redact stuff that they can't write about. So effectively what you get is the stuff that we're allowed to know about, but not not the real detail, because they've decided not to release that detail.
Mm-hmm. But there's a kind of sense that there's a lot more detail there. There's a lot more to know.
I think what they're suggesting is that it's a difficult thing because they began to understand that you couldn't just measure these things physically. You have to measure people's physiology. You have to accept there's a mental experience. That's why they suggest that consciousness is a real key factor here. It's almost as if it can affect the way people think. It can affect their emotions. And how do you measure that as a scientist? And so they began to create scientific ways to study paranormal activity, which includes the mental, the physiological, and the physical and empirical, which is not what you'd normally do when you measure. You have to look at human experience, basically, which is interesting because that they're accepting that consciousness might be as important. The mental experience is as important as a kind of proof than the material, which I think is a different way to look at things.
So they're sort of combining almost like the qualitative and the quantitative data.
Yeah. And these are scientists from the Pentagon doing this. This is not like a psychologist or these are scientists who've come to that conclusion through years of studying it because they themselves experienced stuff that was so strange. Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't. And the other thing is that it wouldn't be. They sometimes said it was like an entity or it was like an intelligence, and it would just shut off equipment, or it wouldn't allow itself to be filmed, or it was communicating in a way, and that communication, the language. But that language was also, I will not allow you to record it. And these are serious scientists. And this sounds like Ghostbusters. I was thinking it sounded like Ghostbusters, but actually it's a real project that happened in real life with real money behind it.
It's strange as you say that as well, because I have experience of like working as a sort of psychedelic guide on DMT trials and ibogaine trials and things like that. And I sometimes get the sense that the substance doesn't want to be studied. And it will make something in the room not work, or something that like can't be recorded, and they have to sort of shut it down for a while and then kind of reboot the trial again. And I'm just like, from where I stand, because I'm like completely open to that kind of there's something else going on. It feels like, if maybe there was a respect for the substance or a respect for where it or what it's coming wants to be from the people that want to study it, it might allow itself to be studied more. Do you know what I mean? Or it's,
it reminds me. I mean, I think the same thing. I think the idea of if I'm going to use this is not the wrong word. Paranormal activity might not be the right word, but let's call it paranormal for now.
Yeah.
Which can include anything that doesn't seem like it's normal.
Yeah.
I think that when I say our super intelligence, our higher selves, or the state of being that we can get to, does not allow us to witness that state in some kind of external objective fashion unless we need to. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and you could also look at things like the double slit experiment in physics, which suggests the wave particle duality. there's a weird thing that happens when consciousness tries to observe itself, and when it does, things tend to collapse. And it might be the case, and we can talk about this more in depth if you want to. That reality itself doesn't allow itself to be objectified.
Mm-hmm.
We're just a bunch of subjective individuals with a consensus reality, but the truth of it is deliberately and conveniently shut off from our own experiences for a reason. And psychedelics can give us a way in, but even then, we haven't reached a point where we can purely perceive truth and reality. Even then, there's a point which will be shut off from. And I think that's probably a good thing, because it's there's a really famous UFO researcher who I love called Jacques Vallée. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a guy. He was really interesting guy because he does consciousness studies as well, and he was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Mm-hmm.
Steven Spielberg cast Francois Truffaut to play him. So he was a French. I don't know if you've seen the film. He's a French guy the scientific advisor who advises the government.
Yeah.
And so Jacques Vallée was the real person by Steven Spielberg. And he says that when all his studies since the 60s to do with UFOs, he says it's consciousness. And actually the Earth is a pressure cooker, evolving consciousness. And it allows us to go to a certain level, then shuts us down. So the pressure builds, the collective experience of consciousness will grow. And when it gets too high, you'll get a glimpse of Mother Mary or a UFO or something strange, and then you'll come back again. You'll bring it to consensus reality, saying, "Hey, this is what happened," and it's slowly through a multidimensional process evolving us to understand the true nature of consciousness. And we're seeing archetypal deities and visions that suit our cultural paradigms, but actually, it's evolving our consciousness. And I think there's some truth to that, and that people who are psychonauts or consciousness explorers, I guess like ourselves, are getting glimpses of this. And I think the trick is not to buy into the narrative too much, to know that there's a lot more to it. But there is a truth to the moment that you experience. There's a truth that you can learn, and then you have to let go of that truth and then go further down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because otherwise you sort of get this kind of very fanatical kind of, I suppose it just builds up. People can kind of see a truth and that's it. And then they kind of planted their flag in the ground and it's like, I know it. And actually what we know kind of about the ever-changingness of everything is that you can't really ever plant your flag in anywhere. It's always going to move and change, and you'll just be left standing on an island with a flag.
I go with the idea that nothing is not. I mean, ultimately, nothing is real, but everything is real. So if we have to live life in the moment that we live in, and we have to take it seriously, and we have to be moral, ethical, and do what we can. But actually, the truth is we don't actually know what's real or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how can we? Exactly. There's just too much complexity. Yeah. Wow, fascinating. I mean, I could go off so many tangents with that. I mean, maybe there's just like one more thing that was coming to me as you were talking, was a bit like the idea of consciousness, this sort of idea that that we are here and then we developed a consciousness, or is it the other way around? That there's actually something. It's like consciousness developed us.
So I've had my own, as you know, I've had my own personal experiences with psychedelics, but probably for me, more importantly, through a Kundalini experience. I think we individually and collectively, we have these experiences. We get glimpses or insights into the nature of reality, and we have to believe it and let go of it at the same time. But one thing that will probably come back over and over again from all of these experiences for me is that consciousness is more paramount and fundamental than my body. So effectively, the reason why I'm interested in these topics is the idea that I think we haven't developed consciousness necessarily, or I do believe that the human body evolves to experience reality more through time, and that means that our connection with reality changes. And so you can say that we're developing or evolving consciousness from that perspective. Or you could say the reverse, which is, well, that perspective has always existed and always will. And the ego in us is dissolving until the truth reveals itself to us. So I think there's two ways to look at it. Either we're human beings that are evolving, or that we're just this kind of false identity that doesn't actually exist, and one day we'll realize we don't exist and the truth will be revealed to us. I think they're both true together, and that depends which way you want to look at it. But I do think that you know, if you have a transcendental experience, either through psychedelics or some other way, and the nature, your perception of space and time changes, then you can understand the idea that if time and space just on one dimension doesn't exist in the same way, that actually, you know, what is the fundamental nature of all things? Well, it's not our body, and it's not our perception of time, and there's no causal reality, there's no cause and effect in that way. So actually, there's just this substance. And in, you know, in Eastern traditions, they might say that the Buddhists might say everything is shunyata, or emptiness, or the Hindus might say it's Satchitananda, some kind of Brahman, some kind of like universal consciousness. And I never really thought about it until the last few years, and I realized that there's probably for me some truth in that there's a universal consciousness, and our bodies tune into it. And because we're less evolved, we see a little bit of it, and then as we get more evolved, we see more and more and more. But yeah, you know, but then you can also say, well, that doesn't pay the bills.
No, you've got to get you've got to get this body doing what it does, and the personality. Yeah.
No. I still have to take my dog out for a walk.
Yeah.
I still have to, you know. So it might. There's a danger that we make this too much an important part of our lives. Yeah. But I like to think about it.
I suppose it's like the old sort of the story of the monk that sits on top of the hill meditating, and he's kind of become one and enlightened with consciousness, and then suddenly he has to go down into the town to go and do some shopping, you know, and he starts kicking dogs and pushing people out of the way. And it's a bit like, you know, yeah, if you focus on one area too much, then you might lose the sort of like the bit about being a human.
Yeah. So I you know, I like, although these things matter to me, I recognize that ultimately we all have to live normal lives, and we're all flawed individuals, and we live in flawed societies, and we just do our best. We muddle on, doing our best we can.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear more about you in terms of your journey. You know, you said something about having a Kundalini awakening. And I mean, as I sort of, you know, said to you just before we started recording, like, you know, I like to talk, I have this kind of fascination with my relationship to purpose. And I sort of feel, you know, I call my psychotherapy practice emerging purpose, because I feel like it's not a static thing. It's not just like, oh, I've got my purpose and now I'm okay. It's sort of more like, it's a relationship kind of every day, really, or every hour, in fact. Like, where am I in flow? Am I out of flow? Well, you know, and I just wondered, do you have any sort of thoughts about that in terms of your own, what's your thoughts about purpose and meaning?
Yeah, that's a good question. When he wrote me an email about the podcast and it's kind of loosely based on purpose, I thought, well, this is a really interesting topic and something that I've always wondered myself. I would divide my life into two parts. I had a pre-Kundalini awakening, and that was in March 2006 and post. And the reason I do that is because it was, I mean, for me, I'm not saying it's for everyone, but for me, it was so profound and so life-changing, and it was absolutely difficult and challenging. I was quite radically changed over time by that experience, and it lasted. You know, it's an event and also a process, and then a series of events. It doesn't just happen in one go.
Okay.
So beforehand, I'm the product of a immigrant family who came to the UK in the 70s, worked hard, believed in good schooling, good education, professional degrees, work in a profession, buy your own property. That was the model that they believed in, and so I always had a healthy skepticism of that myself, but I also recognized I was also, to some extent programmed by that. So it was quite difficult for me to run away from it. But I did, even before my awakening, knew that it didn't really make much sense. So my escape was to, in looking for my purpose, I decided to, I mean, I'll probably be more specific. I feel like I had a purpose. I knew I wanted to study something like philosophy or physics. I wanted to explore reality. I think I knew that before I had an awakening. My programming, my family said, no, you have to earn money.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a degree in economics, which is not something that I'd studied in A-level. So I had no idea what I was doing, but I thought it sounds good. And my parents were like, yeah, it'll make us some money. I got in to a university, London School of Economics, which is a good university for bankers. So everyone I studied with wanted to be a banker. And I just wanted to DJ because I was really into DJing in the 90s.
Yeah.
So I was playing in the local clubs and in the university clubs. And I thought, okay, I'll get out of university and I want to work in the music industry. So my purpose, I love music. Music was my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a connection to music and the club culture of the 90s in a way which was my church, because I didn't have a church, and I'm a Hindu by birth, but I wasn't Hindu by practice. So finding club culture, like many people at that time, it became like a church. It was a communion. It was a oneness, and you'd come together and you dance. And
I was there, Sameer.
So,
I was there.
You're there. Okay, fine. So there was a breaking down of barriers. There was and I think 100%. There's something very spiritual. I completely think that was a spiritual movement, but
Agreed.
It was commercialized.
Yeah.
So when I came out of university, I was in debt. So we had less debt back then, but I was still in debt. So I thought, okay, I better get a job. And the only graduate training scheme I got in, I tried to apply for some record labels and stuff, but they weren't having it. And then I got into I'm not going to diss it too much. I got into KPMG, which is a auditing company. And
KPMG.
KPMG. It's one of the big like PricewaterhouseCoopers or Ernst & Young. It's one of the, or back then Arthur Andersen, and it had a great training scheme, and my parents were happy, and it's kind of a very solid. It's not too much work. It pays well, and it was super boring. And I kept thinking to myself, this cannot be my life. It can't be my life. So I kept thinking every day this. I was hating it because I thought this cannot be my life. This is not my purpose. I know my purpose is more than this. And this is in the early 2000s, and I was really feeling quite depressed. And I didn't know this at the time because I didn't have the wherewithal to understand depression or being a guy growing out of a certain culture. I never really spoke about my emotions. And so I carried this heavy feeling that something wasn't right. And I kind of buried it and tried to get on with stuff. I tried to put it into a relationship, and the relationship didn't work. And then when it didn't work, it threw back even more, thinking I've got no purpose. Because if I have a job I don't like, if I have a girlfriend I like, then I have a purpose. And if that didn't work and I got the job, I just have the job, then who am I? And so I would go into work and be really depressed, and everyone could tell. And I'd go and DJ. And then sometimes I had a pirate radio station show, and I'd leave work early. And they'd go, where are you going? And I'm going to my pirate radio station show in a estate in King's Cross. And they'll be like, what? We don't understand. But that would make me happy. So music was my spiritual. I didn't know at the time, but I put a spiritual value on music. And so I managed to find a way to leave, and just through a series of serendipitous, but not necessarily great experiences, I went to work in music finance, and I worked for a record label. And then I thought to myself, well, this is it. This is what I'm meant to be doing. I'm working in the music industry. I'm working in business. I'm at the time, Napster was happening, and there was a shift in the industry. And I really thought for a moment that this is it. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And that pain and that loneliness never left. It was still there. Something didn't feel quite right. And part of it was because the people I was working with weren't the right people. But part of it was because the music industry, when you get into it, is in itself a fairly exploitative, corrupt industry, which I didn't fully understand. I was working in America as well, so America was way worse than the UK. The exploitation of artists' rights, the exploitation of the way the labels treated people, it was super cutthroat, and also quite morally and ethically wrong. Now, I wasn't mature enough to challenge that. I wasn't mature enough to even articulate it in those ways, but I felt something was wrong. And I deep down, the pain that I had in in the city working at KPMG, I never was able to let go of, so I just took it into music, and it wasn't working for me. And also, it felt like if I stayed here too long, either myself or people I was working with, that I cared about, would be something bad would happen. It just didn't feel right. It's like bad energy. And again, I hadn't had a Kundalini awakening, but I'm using terms. It was a feeling. It just wasn't right. But we had some success in some business stuff we were doing, and I thought, okay, I came across. This is how I got into film. I came across the book rights to a book called Yardi, which back then by Victor Headley, and I grew up in London during the time that Yardis were around, and I kind of, because I was in club culture and music, I love dancehall. I kind of had a connection, and it was an immigrant story. Now, pretty quickly, I realized the book was unfilmable, and that's how I met Nick Love, by the way.
Oh.
Nick Love wanted to work with us on the project. The
director of the Football Factory and
Vertigo.
Yeah.
And we met him in Cannes, and he said, "This is about purpose. It's still about purpose." And he said to us, "I realized the book was unfilmable because it was fairly stereotypical, and also there was no character arc really in there." And he said, Nick Love and Vertigo Pictures came to us and said, "We'll take it. You guys are new to the industry. We'll give you producer credits. We'll take it off your hands. We'll make it." So I said, "What's your story? What's your story?" And he literally said, "Fuck the story." Right, because I don't care. Like, just to make money. And it was that point where I thought, no, actually, let me think. I'm a young man, and I can make a film with Nick Love. He made Football Factory in the business, and he's a bit weird to me. But you know what? He's willing to give us the money and the credit. But in my heart, I thought, I can't make a film when someone just says, "Fuck the story, it doesn't matter." And I actually realized that that's when I wanted to make film. When I was tested, I actually can't just make any film for any reason.
There was a moment. It was like a moment in your life when you kind of had to kind of stand up for yourself, or truth came through.
Yeah. And he looked at me and the partners with me. He said, "Guys, do you not want to make?" Literally, I remember this. "Do you not want to make any money? Do you not want to make money?" And I thought to myself, if this is the way I have to make money, then I'll probably not. And that's when I realized that actually I was holding on to a property, a book right, that itself was problematic and fairly racist in its own way. And it was that was a point. I basically made a decision, and I think it's connected. The year before I had a Kundalini awakening. I think there was a series of events where I had to make a certain number of decisions, which was, who am I? Why am I doing this? What's my purpose? Now, there's another Sameer who would have taken the money and got the film credit.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Love would have done whatever he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
They would have kicked us off the project. Maybe we would have got a small credit and some money, but that would have given us one up, and we were in our late 20s to the next thing. And I said no to that. And I think there was a part of me that regretted it, because I thought, well, I'm letting go of it. But I just thought, I can't have my name on something which I might think is problematic. And that was maybe bold, and to him quite stupid, because he's like, "Why are you guys doing this?" No, it turns out. So then, what happened was, within a year. So I was going through quite a dark. So I was still having this dark experience. So thinking, well, why am I doing this? Like, okay, I kind of, through trial and error, I'm beginning to understand. I want to tell stories that mean something, not just any old story. I want to work with people who I trust, and that's difficult. I mean, you might know this in the UK. Back then in the UK film industry, again, it's a weird market for independent films. There was a tax credit, was bringing a lot of money from a lot of rich people, but they were not making great products then. And so through trial and error, I was getting to the point where I thought, okay, I haven't made anything yet, but at least I'm beginning to understand what I want. And then there was the industry, which was the complete commoditization of art, the complete commoditization of music, of narratives, of screenwriters. And I just couldn't understand why I was like a rebel trying to fight that system and constantly being put down, because I was making decisions to not compromise, but not compromising, nothing was being made. And by the end of the year, so that was 2005. I met him in Cannes in 2005. End of the year, I had really bad sciatica. So I had such a painful 3 weeks. I was turning 30, but I thought, why am I existing? Like, what's going on? Like, what's my purpose? Because I couldn't move at all.
Yeah.
And I look back at that time, and I realized my body was telling me, enough's enough. You're just going down the wrong the wrong pathway, son. You need to, and it was lying flat on myself for 6 weeks, thinking, well, what's my purpose? I can't physically move. So as a man, I can't provide. I have made nothing. I'm 30 years old, and I have friends who worked in the city and are now making a lot of money, and they're doing really well. I'm rubbish at relationships. I'm wasting a lot of money. I bought like a nice fast car back then that was too small for me, which is hence why I had a bad back. I was living a life that wasn't right for me, and my body said to me, "You really need to think about all your choices." So laying me flat, my back in utter pain, help me face who am I, what is my purpose, why am I here? And it was at that point that through another interesting experience, I realized that actually, and it came to me because I couldn't understand why someone could suffer so much. And it was not, if you have sciatica, nerve pain can be excruciating, but there's nothing actually life or death wrong with you. So the NHS won't necessarily do much. I might give you painkillers, and you could have an operation, but is it worth an operation if it's just a back pain? And I couldn't believe I could suffer so much for such a small reason, and that it was stopping me doing anything. And it really helped me understand that there's something else going on. Like I thought, it doesn't make any sense. And that's when something happened to me, which made me realize that it could be emotional. And I had no understanding that the body might store emotion, or that emotions might be linked to physical pain. And it was at that point when I began to realize that this might be because there's something emotionally wrong with me. And retrospectively, I was going through a long, dark night of the soul from my graduation until that point. I didn't know why I existed. And then my lack of purpose.
It sounds, sorry to cut in, it just sounds like a little bit like, in that moment you were kind of humbled, like here you are flat on your back, and you're either going to just medicate yourself up and just try and get through it, or you're going to listen. And it sounds like you had to listen somehow.
Yeah, it was my mother who said to me that don't have an operation, it's dangerous. I also realized it was at that point where the emotion issue that I had was how it was a deduction, but there was certain dreams that helped me understand it. It was mother's relationships, how I felt, and the maternal instincts. There was something about the lack of care I had for myself, something to do with it. I didn't know exactly, but I began to understand that I had a certain mentality and a certain lack of love for myself. And that lack of love was causing me to really push my body to the extreme, to the extent that it said to me, okay, now you'll listen. So it did humble me. And instinct said to me, don't take too much. In the end, I got some diazepam, which kind of helped a little bit. But I refused medication for about 3 or 4 weeks and decided just to suffer through the pain. And I didn't understand why. But I think I wouldn't advise this for anyone to do, but I think sometimes listening to the pain in you is what you need to do to really, really, really shift. So when I began to realize that it could be emotional, my back began to heal enough for me to start at least walking a little bit, just enough for me to move. And that over time became enough for me to do things. And that's when I realized, okay, I've got to start looking at myself from the word I use now is transpersonal. I didn't know the word transpersonal then, but from a more transpersonal space. And I just knew there was an area. I might have used the word spiritual back then, but I probably didn't. I didn't know what the word would, but I knew there was something more. And then I did 2 things. I got quite curious about neuro-linguistic programming. So I did a life coaching course in NLP.
Oh, yeah.
Just to learn about myself and about how I program. And then I did one meditation class. And that was in 2006. And then when I got home from meditation class, I decided to meditate at home. And some energy just went up me and burst in my head. And I just felt this explosion. And that now I could say it's Kundalini awakening. I had no reference to what one was before. And in a way, nothing dramatically changed after that one experience. So I thought I'd put it down to some kind of weird thing. But then a week later, I went out clubbing. I came back and my hands started moving spontaneously around my body. And I didn't know this, but one of the signs of the Kundalini awakening is spontaneous movements, what's called kriyas. And it began over every night. It would happen to me. My body would move spontaneously. And I did think it was weird, but part of me just said, just go with it. And it began to heal my back. So the movements that I did were spontaneous and yogic and were helping me get into positions that I could never do before. And it began to heal the real stiffness in my lower back. It was an L4, L5 problem. And it did it enough for me to know that this is real. It's not I'm not delusional. I mean, you do think you're delusional, but then you also think, well, if my back's getting better, then there's something going on.
Let it happen.
And let it happen. And then, I mean, there's a much longer story than that, because I didn't know the other side of things, which was it was reprogramming my mind in really profound ways, because I wasn't guided by anybody. I was just doing it on my own. I was basically guiding myself, or it was guiding me. There was no filter for which to understand the process. I was Googling stuff, but there wasn't much available information in 2006 on the internet. There was a little bit of stuff, but not enough for me to really understand it. So I just went with it, thinking this is my purpose. In fact, that's the thing. I thought, oh, here it is. This is my purpose. I found it.
Did you know at the time it was a Kundalini awakening? Is that what had you found that out? Or
I had come across the word before. I didn't acknowledge that this was it, probably for about a month. And then I recognized it because spontaneous yoga is a manifestation of Kundalini. So I thought, because the energy up my back wasn't enough. Some people speak about like fire going up their spine. I didn't feel fire going up my spine, but I had and also had spontaneous mudras. So my fingers still move in like this constantly if I let them. And that is a specific sign of a Kundalini awakening. So that's when I thought, this is so specific. Why am I moving in very Hindu kind of dance-like ways? And there's only one experience that can do that for you. So then I realized, okay, well, this must be it. But it took me a while, because I also feel like it's probably a good thing I didn't know what it was straight away, because it did give me, I didn't see it through any particular lens. I knew it was important. I knew it was profound. I knew it was spiritual. Maybe a part of me felt, well, this is what I've been waiting for. This is my purpose, which again was a mistake, and probably quite dangerous as well, because you're not meant to identify with the process. So my life was two stages of purpose. Yeah. Prior to that was fairly materialistic. I guess it was materialistic, recognizing there's something missing in my life and always trying to find it in somewhere else and not finding it. And then having this awakening experience, which then guided me in quite an interesting way through, and I'm now in the 18th year of it.
So having listened to your experience, and you're talking about purpose, and the fact that you kind of listened to your calling, and went through this Kundalini awakening, here you are 18 years later, and I'd love to hear sort of like a bit of your journey through that and what you've learned, and in relation to the panel that we're doing next week in Brighton, around the question of like healing the collective and what that means. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that in terms of like embodied practice and with the crossover of psychedelics?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is that what I've learned is that practices like meditation, yoga, psychedelics, dance, sex, somatic practices, all of these can could potentially induce some form of non-dual experience. And by non-dual experience, I mean an experience where you begin to feel that everything is one. All things make sense. And there's a danger here, because if you don't know what's going on, you may think you're God, you may think you're Jesus, you may think that everything makes sense, you may think you've got it. Mm-hmm. And it's just a moment of experience. And in that, you're not meant to identify with that experience. Yeah. So what's happening? So I guess the answer to your question is, I think there's a collective awakening happening, and that people, without knowing it, may induce these experiences, and they will not know what's happening. And if they reject it, it can be very, very hard, and it could be pathologized as some kind of mental health condition, or it may just stop them from working. It may stop them from doing things that they would need to survive every day. And there might be a reason this process is doing it. It may be stopping you doing things that are bad for you. But there's a problem here, which is without information about this, more and more people are having these experiences because they are entering things like psychedelics and or yoga and or meditation and or breath work, thinking that these are healing modalities, but these are powerful spiritual techniques to enter into altered states of consciousness. So psychedelics we know about, but yoga was actually one part of an eightfold path, including ethics, morals, pranayama, samadhi, dharana, different states in consciousness and concentration to help you get to a certain level. Yoga was not necessarily just a way to get fit or a way to be supple. So when people start doing these techniques, they may induce something in them, which can be good, but can also be quite terrifying. So the first thing I'd say is that what I've learned, and this is also through running a support group for people going through these kind of experiences called the Kundalini Collective, is that many people who we come across have no spiritual background in the sense that they don't practice spirituality, but then they are doing something recreationally like psychedelics or yoga or meditation. And they're doing it not in a spiritual way, they're doing it in a way because they want to balance their life. Like I did. I had a back problem. I was working in the film industry and I thought, I need to do something to really help to space my mind out. I will do meditation. But actually, I was awakening something in me. So what I've learned is that there is a subconscious evolution happening, I think, in society. We're beginning to take techniques that were secret and that were meant to induce these experiences, and we're commoditizing it and making them recreational or kind of fitness or wellness modalities. And I don't think that's that's not 100% bad, but it's an inefficient process. Actually, these techniques are there to do something much more powerful, and some people are getting to that without knowing it. So I think psychedelics to some extent is, in fact, psychedelics is 100% part of that. Mm-hmm. And now with psychedelics in particular, now my experiences have been with ayahuasca, with psilocybin. MDMA is a psychedelic, and I think being someone who clubbed a lot, I took a lot of MDMA, and I think the year before my Kundalini awakening, I remember having a lot of profound realization, sitting on a speaker with a lot of bass, being in my heart. I couldn't get onto my own, realizing things about my mother, people that I knew. It was a meditative space for me, and I think that cleared some stuff in me, which, without knowing it, helped me get to that Kundalini awakening. So I think these powerful tools, if we could begin to understand why they exist and what the real purpose is, I think we could have real societal change. The problem is that we're framing them within a materialistic, capitalistic, and Cartesian framework. And the unfortunate thing about that is that they're not really getting the gains that they can give. And the people who are getting the gains don't know it, or they think they're ill, or they have a mental health problem. And I think there's an issue there. So that's I'm trying to kind of give a kind of macro to what I've learned. And I've learned a lot more than that, but that's the kind of overall.
Sure. And we're very, we've obviously got like a boundary of time. So I really appreciate your kind of, getting specific and, well, I mean, having, an overview, and then, there might be some more specifics to come. But, I certainly agree on a lot of things you said in terms of, it comes back to that thing around like, so are we going to use psychedelics or yoga or whatever these techniques are, to like make us better, to go back and be better worker bees in the thing? It's kind of a bit like, sure, there's this sort of whole movement around microdosing, I guess, and there's something, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I just think, what's the approach? Why are you doing it? Is it so that you can be a more a sort of more valued member of society in terms of like you're more you're achieving what you should achieve in that sort of paradigm, rather than I suppose in terms of what you're saying, or what I understand to you to be saying, all these techniques that can be used, like not just, they're all on a level really, aren't they? Like psychedelics, yoga, breath work, cold saunering, or going for walks. Or there was there's that famous thing about a woman who used to sit at the front of Ramdas talks, and it was because she knew, because she used to crochet. Do you know what I mean? And that was her way in. But it's so there's a lot of ways in. but then what do we do with it? And I suppose that's the question around like the healing the collective is like, is it once we start realizing that it can be about healing and that psychedelics can be potentially used in a therapeutic way, is it about just then going back to work and being, or is there some change? Will change come from that?
So my succinct answer will be, I thought my purpose, thinking about purpose, at first I thought my purpose was this powerful Kundalini awakening and all the glitzy stuff that came with it. And I crashed within two years. It taught me a lesson. I couldn't, if you attach yourself to these experiences, then you will burn. But the other thing it helped me understand is, and the first 2 years of crash and burn, and the next 16 years is pick myself up. And I realized that it was guiding me to heal my trauma, but through facing my fears. So my purpose, my day job wasn't film. My day job was healing my trauma. I didn't realize this, and I was still fighting it, thinking I need to earn money, I need to do this, I need to do that. But no, the people that I've met through our support group and the other people I've met who've had these experiences, whether it's spiritual, Kundalini, transcendental, they can't do what they did before. They might change some relationships. They might change their jobs because without knowing it, they're being pulled from unhealthy social entanglements. Now, they will fight that because they're attached to it. They crave it. But what the awakening process or these psychedelic processes are saying are, we're now going to help you heal. But in helping you heal, you have to let go of the things that you desire the most because these are the things that are really bad for you. And in any materialistic society, it's going to be possessions, wealth, status, bad relationships, and you'll think that you are crazy or that you will reject it, but actually it's helping you. So the first thing, so the evolutionary nature of these experiences are to make our purpose about healing individual and collective trauma. That's what I believe.
Uh-huh.
Now, if we don't accept that, there's no point doing these experiences because when you hit that point of no return, you will not be able to not listen to it. It will take you kicking and screaming to face your fears. So if you're going to go down that road, you have to be prepared to make trauma healing your everyday job. And that could take away your career. It could take away your relationship, or it might give you, I've got thank God, a healthy marriage through this. And everyone I've met has at least had sustainable ways to live over time. Maybe the first 2 years was a bit dicey, but it's an intelligent process, and this is why it's difficult to talk about because what is intelligent? Maybe there's a collective energy. Maybe we're part of the collective and we're individuals, and we connect with the collective. When you connect with the collective, there's a higher intelligence on some level, like an algorithm that's guiding you. And the first thing it's doing is clearing your energetic traumas. That in the Vedas would be pranic healing, or in Taoism would be Qi or Qi. So there's some kind of process, and that's the evolutionary aspect, which is when you begin to clear the energy and heal your individual trauma, then it becomes collective in your family and your friends. I believe, and again, it's going to sound a bit weird, I think you get certain abilities. And some people talk about being more sensitive, clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. I still have spontaneous mudras and spontaneous movement, which helps me. And the other things, you get an instinct, you get a clearer instinct of who you are and your purpose. But none of these things are good to attach yourself to. The moment that you think, oh, this is a good thing, I have this ability, it will destroy you again. You'll become a cult leader, like a lot of the Indian gurus or a lot of people in California. You'll start selling and you'll start saying, I can give you a Kundalini awakening, and you'll feel blissful. It's not a blissful experience because it's meant to help you face your shadow, your fears. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if we can create structures that allow people to go through these experiences and be held, like support groups or peer-to-peer groups, that's what will change. So I think it's evolutionary. I think it's evolutionary through healing trauma. And I think trauma healing could be our society, our generation's purpose, and the next generation's purpose as well, rather than going out and making loads of money. The two are not mutually exclusive, but if healing becomes our career path and our purpose, then all other things, support and shelter and food, can come out of that.
Totally agree. Yeah, it's like It's like, yeah, don't make the kind of external the thing that you focus on and then kind of do the thing. Oh, once I've got all that, I'll do the work. It's a bit like,
Yeah.
I just need to do the work and tune in to whatever it is I need to do, and then and hopefully within that I will be in my purpose and my flow, and the universal intelligence, whatever you want to call that, will support me through that. And that does sound, some people that sound, oh yeah, that sounds very privileged. Yeah, very.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing is, you could ask a question. What someone I know, I run a collective with, will say to me, well, what about people in Gaza?
Yeah.
Can they go through it? Or what about, I ask the question, when in Africa, so these techniques are not just Western techniques; they come from indigenous cultures. So that's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that I think they're qualities of particular cultures that bring in certain elements of non-duality. And I think the key for me is this idea of non-duality. You have to learn to love the people you hate, and this is the key. So you can't see enemies outside of you. This process keeps teaching me that. And the moment I see that, I'm going to have to go through a long journey of recognizing that person I think is my enemy is actually my friend. On some level, it's a really difficult thing, and it can cause a lot of problems. I can fight
Trump,
it.
You got to put Trump on your altar.
Right. Well, that's the crazy thing, which is everything has a purpose and a place. You stop looking at things through a random series of chaotic events that have no connection together. Everything is interconnected, or as the Buddhists will say, everything's conditioned on everything else. And this conditioning is what life is. And that conditioning crosses space and time. But I think the key for people who've had these experiences is that you can never completely forget that. You have a glimpse of that experience. And even if you're in your worst, most dark moment, which I've been subsequently, because I've had that experience, you know that there's something more. It carries you through the darkest places because you understand that there's meaning behind a lot of suffering. But that's so difficult. I understand how privileged it might sound to say to anybody, your suffering has purpose. And I can understand that can sound so patronizing. So that's a difficult place then to get to, because that's what I believe. But then I can also accept that I can't just go and say that because it's not necessarily meaningful to other people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I feel a bit guilty saying it, but I kind of feel like when I look at the world, with all the shadow, with all the stuff that's going on, and with all the joy and all the beauty, it's kind of like when I experience gratitude in my life, I almost simultaneously experience grief. Because it's kind of like, oh my God, look at this beautiful place with all these beautiful relationships and these people that I love and everything. And it's like, and they're all going to die, and I'm going to die, and we're going to lose it all, and it's all going to go. And it's sort of this beautiful vein of gratitude and grief all together. I'm sort of laughing and crying at the same time. But it's in a kind of perfection of that. Do you know what I mean? And it's sort of, I can't help but think that that's how it works, really. But it's...
Yeah, I think as the Buddhists will say, everything is impermanent, and our suffering comes from the impermanent nature of all things, including our family, our friends, ourselves. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. And I think my journey has begun to help me understand, and I say this with profound relief for myself, that all my suffering is love. That all the times, my long dark night of the soul, all the real difficult times I went through relationships, with finding my purpose, which for me personally was really depressing. I'm not saying it was for someone else, but for me it had purpose. And I can say that retrospectively. And I sometimes think of my younger self, and what would I say to that younger self when if I met my 21-year-old, 22-year-old, 23-year-old younger self? I wouldn't say to myself, don't go through these things. But what I might say is, is it possible that you can learn to love yourself in those moments? Is it possible to feel into those moments of pain? And rather than shut down or not open up, love yourself and then maybe share it with other people. Open up about it, talk about it, don't carry it alone. I didn't have that understanding that it's okay to talk about your feelings, it's okay to talk about your depression. But I think there are ways through it, but I think it opened me up. It wasn't like I wasn't a random person having random experiences, and these experiences are chemical in nature. I believe in the mental process of all things, so these are important experiences for me to understand and to work through. And it just so happens that I did it, probably, going back to I think club culture, DJing, I think for me, it was fairly medicinal. It was the closest I could get to shamanic practice without knowing it was shamanic practice. And I'm not going to shy away from saying I think MDMA is part of that.
Completely agree.
I'm not all the time, but I think it was an important part of me letting some barriers down and understanding myself. And I was self-medicating using ancient shamanic practices that happened to come up on London and British dance floors, which is a great thing.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. I mean, I'm banging on about that all the time. It sort of feels like I feel like so lucky to be having had that experience of like connection and group ritual and sort of elevated, ritualistic dance practice in a kind of raving culture, and then here I am, like 30, nearly 40 years later, working as a psychedelic guide, and it's like I just believe that it's like, oh look, we're still using these substances on trials because I believe in it. I believe that is, and in a way, sometimes I feel like maybe it doesn't need to be used in trials and that in that way. Maybe it'd be better if there was something. But maybe that's the way the substance has to come back into being. That's why we're experiencing a renaissance or whatever. Because it's come through a new respect for it and a new research.
Well, my last thing is, I think this is another conversation. I think between 1988 and maybe 2000, what the UK went through with raving culture was a spiritual revolution, and that generation doesn't know it. They don't know it. When you get 1 million people popping pills every week on fields around the country, that is a shamanic expression, and there are reasons why it came. Now, people may never understand why they were doing it. They don't have to. They were part of a spiritual movement. It just happened to be put into a recreational, but it wasn't recreational. It came out of something. And I think that's an important thing to know about. This is why there's something, we went through a sea change in that time, and there's a reason for that.
Well, you can kind of see also it repeated. There was the 60s, and then it kind of went underground, and then something came back up in the 90s, and then I wonder if there's one on the way again. There might be one coming in a few next few years.
I hope so.
Yeah. Just before I go, I really honestly, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and it's been really fascinating. I'm sure we could talk for hours actually. You know what I mean? I just wondered if there's anything you feel like that I might have missed, or a question that I could have asked you. Do you know what I mean? Is there something that you feel that is important about the healing the collective?
Well, just I'm going to consciously stream and try to be very quick. I think the talk we're doing next week about psychedelics and the collective evolution, I think it's an important conversation, because I think those kind of conversations are going to grow over the next 5 and 10 years with the advent of AI. I think when AI starts coming and taking middle class, it's already taking middle class jobs. I work in film, and a lot of film jobs are going, but also working class because of robotics and AI. I think people are going to be asking, what is my purpose?
Yeah.
It won't just be, your kids will go to university, they'll graduate, and they won't have the same type of jobs available for them. And there might be universal basic income. People might be able to live and have food and shelter, but then they'll be asking, why do I exist? And that's what I was asking when I was working in the city, working in the music industry. I didn't feel happy. If you can't get a job that suits you, if you're sitting there wondering, why do I exist? That existential question is going to change you. And I think that's going to happen over the next 5, 10 years. So I think these questions are important. I think humanity has a different trajectory, and I think it's going to become more obvious in the mainstream. So I think these conversations are really important. So that's my last point.
That's really nice. Yeah. Have you got anything that you're working on that's coming up that you want to mention? Or?
Yeah, I'm working with a lady called Katie Mottram. Do you know anything about Katie Mottram?
No.
Okay, so lovely lady. She works in mental health, but through the spiritual awakening space. She worked in the mental health profession, and she had a spiritual awakening, not Kundalini, where she began to recognize that the mental health profession needed to change in the UK and around the world and become aware of these kind of experiences, to the extent that she doesn't believe in differential diagnosis. And I should let her talk about that. I'm not an expert in that. And the way that the whole mental health profession should really no longer exist in the way it looks at mental health, because mental health may not be an issue in itself. These are all forms of some kind of, I don't use the word spiritual awakening, but some kind of awakening perspective. But in a society that's materialistic, we have to compartmentalize it within this paradigm, otherwise we can't understand it. Anyway, we are starting, she had a movement called Emerging Proud, which was quite an activist movement, which made some inroads in the British mental health profession in the late 2010s. We're starting a group or a collective called the Elephant Collective. It's got two purposes. One is a community where people can share their experiences of non-ordinary transformative experiences. These are Kundalini experiences, near-death experiences. These could be precognition, premonition. Doesn't have to be transformative per se. But also the other layer of it is how people are transforming through facing their trauma, whether they've had these experiences or not had these experiences. But we are making a link because collectively, many people that have these experiences begin to look at trauma differently. I'm making a documentary film about this to go along with the community. She's working on the community itself. And I'm putting together a 10-minute short film to be a proof of concept in order to crowdfund maybe around April, May. So that's what we're working on next. So
that sounds space. Amazing. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, if you can, if there's any links to that, I can put it on the show notes and everything.
I'll send. Yeah. Please do. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks once again, Sameer. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, there you go. That was my conversation with Sameer. I hope you found it interesting. Please feel free to comment and keep the conversation going. The next episodes will be available in visual format, which will be available on YouTube. So please do head over there and like and subscribe and all that business. And here I'm going to put a little plug in for ASA, which is a beautiful community of people led by Rosalind Watts, who was one of the lead assistants in the imperial trials using psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. And I've been in touch with Ros over the years and remember working with her at Synthesis Institute, creating a kind of holding container for people that had strong psychedelic experiences. Ros has been working on this project ASA for the last 5 or 6 years, building up a community of people all over the world that focuses on the 12 trees, So every month you get a new tree that comes through. It's an online community and people meet online. There's sharing circles. There's all sorts of things. There's a book club. It's a beautiful community, actually. And what's so nice about it and what I enjoy about it is meeting people from all over the world and just having a space to actually share what's going on in a certain month and different times in lives. And it's kind of based more on a sort of 12-step aspect of sharing in terms of like you share what's going on for you, and it's not about getting feedback or anyone giving you advice. It's more about learning to hear what you're saying into the space and then seeing how that goes from there. But anyway, so if you haven't heard of ASA or you're interested in joining community, please do have a look at that. I'll put a link in the show notes. And yeah, it's a really lovely place to meet and share. So until the next episode, take care and thank you for listening to the Emerging Purpose Podcast.